Hello, people. I see that many computers are processing joining this Zoom session here, so I'm just going to talk a little bit while everyone's getting on, and as people are joining us as well. Of course, I have up on the screen here our flyer for the Maine Export Week, and we are diving into our third session today, the Export Business Planning. Big race there. And again, my name is Peter Harriman. I am with the Maine Small Business Development Center. And basically, the Maine Small Business Development Center is found statewide and nationwide. We are an organization that provides no-cost consulting for businesses, and we are happy to host with the SBA in the Women's Business Center this Maine Export Week, where we kind of highlight some of the issues that small businesses have, especially when it concerns exporting, as far as concerns, fears, resources, how to do it. Today is going to get into how to strategize and write up that plan. Tomorrow is going to be the same time as today, 11:30, is going to be how to obtain capital for your export business. We've already done a panelist discussion. We've already done some resources, which included MITSI, the SBDC, a law firm in Navigear, right? And so today we're going to do the business planning. Tomorrow we're going to do the capital, and then at the end of this, because these are all being recorded, we're going to send everyone who signed up for these sessions a recording, or the links to all 4 recordings, so you can look at all the series. We're also going to put these on YouTube on the SBDC site, so that if your friends or family that are also interested, you can also share it with them. During the session, we do encourage you, if you have questions, and the best place to put those questions is in the chat. And I just sent everyone a chat, so in your bottom, if you're not used to the Zoom platform, in the bottom there would be some kind of signal that pops up that indicates that you have a new chat, so you can put it there. Or by all means, if you don't want to use the chat, you can either click the raise hand button and or unmute yourself and ask the question. I would try to ask that if you have a question, that it's a broad question that everyone can benefit from. And if you do have specific questions, those are by all means great things to talk about. But if it's too specific and you get down a rabbit hole that's particular to your situation, it might be a better one-on-one discussion versus a group discussion in this program. So so chat, raise your hand, we can answer the questions. I'm going to turn it over to Brad. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to turn it over to Brad Curry from the SBA to introduce our speaker.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. Today, for the export business planning, we have Grace Mo Phillips, who is a small business exporter. She's also the director of the Women's Business Center in Portland, and an overall wealth of information. Thank you very much for coming today, Grace. We appreciate it, and please take it away.
Thanks, Brad. I just noticed that I did not have to mute myself today, because I am not at home, so my dogs would not be chiming in. So that's good, and it's a new environment that I'm getting accustomed to. So let me share screen really quick here. Okay, so can everybody see my screen? Full screen. Oh, perfect. Okay. So, well, today's topic is international business planning. The objective, we are not trying to teach you how to write an international plan, but we'll be using the business plan model as a guide to develop a robust international or export strategy for you. So let me see, I'm trying to maneuver this new slide system that I'm using. Again, like Brett said, I am Grace Phillips, and I am the program director for the Women's Business Center in Southern Maine. Just like the SBDC and SCORE, the Women's Business Center is a resource partner of SBA. We provide no-cost, confidential, and one-on-one advising to help female entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs to start and grow their business. We also offer professional development programs and resources to help overcome challenges that disproportionately affect female entrepreneurs. But we don't turn down any entrepreneurs, regardless of their gender, whose needs align with our expertise. We will help them as well. Personally, I've been involved in international business in a different capacity for nearly 30 years, and I always enjoy the thrill of international trade. There are so many moving parts and so many different elements that are always changing. And in 2014, I started my own export business on frozen seafood, and 100% of my sales are on exports. So I'm learning every day as I go. Now, international business planning, why is it important, right? A lot of times we meet with clients and they started their own domestic business very organically. They never had to create a business plan unless they have to go to the bank and get financing, right? But for international expansion, you do want to create an international business plan before you bring your products overseas. Why? Well, every country is different. As we all know, the government system is different. They have different policy, different cultures, different language, and currencies are different. So, there's so many elements, working with other countries that can be quite challenging. So developing an international plan really helps you mitigate, guide you through the steps and help you establish and track milestones. And also, most importantly, help you mitigate risk proactively instead of reactively. Just look at Canada, for instance. There's no other country as close to the US as Canada. We have very similar culture, we have similar language, climate, climate, and we are even in the USMCA trade agreement with Canada. But they have different packaging requirements. They have different minimum wage requirements. The currency is different. And even big companies, for instance, Target, Big Lots, Best Buy, Sears, just to name a few, these big companies all shuttered their operations in Canada at one point. So those are the big companies. We're talking about us. We are the small businesses. We don't have resources to risk, our business, if we fail internationally. So that is really important that we do our diligence, make our plan to not to avoid or prevent any risk, but at least help lower our risk when we go international. Now, this is a list of a typical business plan. We have the executive summary. We talk about the company a little bit. We'll talk about what products and services our company produce or serve, and what is the competitive environment, what is our marketing or sales strategies, and organization and management structure, and also financial analysis. Now, these are just for domestic market. When we talk about internationally, we have a whole list of additional considerations. Will your business model change in a different country? To start, what country to export to? That's a good question. A lot of people, when they are contemplating exporting, that's the question they ask. There are other cultural, differences, per country. What are they? How do we overcome those, cultural differences? There are definitely legal and regulatory issues that we have to deal with. It's a higher risk venture that we have to be aware of. And what are they? So my goal today is using the business plan model to go through the different considerations, but we'll add in the international aspect as we go along this list. So hopefully this is just an overview. We cannot possibly cover everything in just 1 hour, but just know that there are a lot of resources in Maine, MITC, SCORE, SBDC, and Women's Business Centers. And I will show you a lot of different other free resources that are available that will help you make your plan. So don't panic, sit back and relax. So first off, on the business plan is the executive summary. Now, a lot of people ask me, what is the executive summary? Who is the executive and who is writing this business plan? Very, simply put, executive summary is just a snapshot or synopsis of your entire plan. You give your target audience a snapshot of your objective and your plan of action. You can just briefly touch on the 5 W's and 1 H. What are you going to export? Why are you exporting? Where are you exporting? Who is your target customer in the overseas market? And what are the time frame that you will be exporting? And how do you export? Things like that. Be very focused on who you'll ask in your executive summary, because depending on your target audience, you may want to frame it differently. If it is a lender, you may want to customize it for, from a lender's perspective. If you are presenting this to a potential overseas partner, for a request or for proposal, then you will have to draft it, slightly differently. Although the executive summary is in the beginning of any business plan, I always encourage my clients to write it last because it's a summary of your plan. So now talking about your company, some of the topics that you want to incorporate is, what is the business name? What is the current organizational structure? What is the location? What's the size? What is your company vision or your value? What, you may say, I know all these already. I am the business owner. Why do I need to, write these down? Well, if you do need to present your international plan to a lender, that lender does not know about your company, right? So you may have to educate the audience. And even if you are not preparing this plan for anyone else but yourself, it helps you reflect on your export readiness, which I will explain shortly. When you talk about your location, why am I stressing the advantage and disadvantage? We are in Maine, right? We have a lot of, there's a lot of advantages being in Maine. We are close to Canada, which is our biggest trading partner. We are close to Europe. We are close to major shipping ports. We can send products to ship out from Boston or New York. We have a lot of natural resources as well. But in a global scale, not many people know about Maine. And a lot of people know of the US, they only relate to New York or California. But Maine is little known to most people overseas. So, we want, when we talk to other potential buyers or potential partners, you may want to, really sell Maine, why is a Maine company, also it can be a strong player on the global stage. When you talk about your business size, it helps you gauge your capacity. What is the capacity left for export? Are you at full capacity even to entertain the domestic market? Do you need to increase personnel or other resources to facilitate overseas operations? So those are the things that you may want to consider. In addition to that, now when we talk about international or exporting, how would the export plan fit into the bigger picture in your current operation? Is your company ready to export? Is there any gaps, in terms of production, in terms of capacity or human resources? Are you ready? If you are not ready now, what are the milestones that you will hit, to get to the point that you are ready to export? And also an honest assessment of the management, commitment to export. Sometimes it's nice to talk about it, but when it comes down to it, it might be, more challenging than you think. So, the top management needs to be committed to it. A lot of times when you started to export, you may not see your return on investment immediately. It may take a year to 2 years or even 3 years before you see results. So are you ready to commit to those, initial years when you are not, you might be feeling strain in cash flow, for instance. So, this is a good time for you to stop and think, are we ready to commit to this? Now, I put in here the business model a little bit. Let's dive deeper on the business model. When we export, there are usually two, in general, two export business model you can pursue. The first one is indirect export. You, as a U.S. producer, you would be selling your product to a export company or trading company, usually located domestically. I am an exporter for seafood, right? So my suppliers, lobster processors, they sell their products to me, and I sell to overseas countries. The advantage of doing indirect export is that it's low cost for the U.S. producer, is somewhat lower risk. You are dealing with a domestic company, but the disadvantage is that you have little control of what happens when your product gets to overseas countries. Usually the exporter or the foreign importer, they determine where to place your products, what price to sell at, in the foreign market. So you have little say on that, but you have to gauge. It's easier to get started with a basically outsourcing your export activities. That's the benefit of indirect exporting. Now, there's also direct exporting, meaning you being the U.S. producer, you deal with an overseas buyer directly. It could be through a distributor. A distributor can be in many forms. It could be, through licensing, it could be through franchise, or it could be a joint venture with a foreign business. And you can even sell directly to end user. A lot of times though, this is the most expensive way to export, because chances are you will have to have your own staff stationed in that foreign market to work exclusively in the marketing and sales of your product. So let's get back to that question of where do we export? How do I even start? That is a very, usually stone a lot of people, and without knowing where to export, they just shy away from it. Certainly we do need to do research to understand, what region. Let's start with the region. Which region is more favorable, and what region might be less favorable, and then do your market research and then narrow down your potential market. I would recommend no more than 5 markets to start if you do not have any export experience. With your narrowed list, and then do some more potential or do more research on potential barriers, and then rank your selection and set your priorities. Now, I would say sometimes, the most popular foreign market might not be the right one for you. I can share my personal experience. When I started my seafood business, I deliberately made the decision not to export to China, right? I am just a small business. I have very limited resources when I started. I gather that selling to China, I might run into payment issues, for instance. I may run into competition issues, and it was just not worth my time to compete in that market. I chose some other countries that were easier for me to export to. And lo and behold, when the China and US had their trade war several years ago, my business did not get dinged. And if I spent a lot of my resources, into the Chinese market, I may not be, surviving today already. So just don't go with what everybody else do. You go with your guts a lot of times, and go with what you are capable of doing. So there are a few free resources that can help you identify the potential markets. I am going to shift my screen a little bit, and I'm going to share a different screen. There are a few fun and free resources that you can utilize when you try to narrow down market. The one I like to use, and I think Peter mentioned it yesterday too, is the Google Market Finder. Okay, I did some research. No, if you can see, I choose Nike as my guinea pig. So basically, you just put your website, your business website, or maybe your competitor's website if you want to, and Google would identify the product categories here, and if they all match your business category, just say confirm category. I want to go globally. Voila! See, it shows me all the top countries. The darker color, the more potentials, right? And wow, no wonder Nike is a global company. You see, everybody just love Nike. And so this is a very easy to use way to, just to get a basic, by region. Let's say, I want to focus on Europe, if I were Nike. And another way to use is, Google Trends. Do you see my Google Trends screen here? Okay, so I was just doing a blueberries, just type up random, keywords, and I choose a worldwide, and you can choose by country as well, but I choose worldwide because I don't know which country to export blueberries to yet. And it shows me by priority, what countries are good to export or consider exporting blueberries to. Canada, Australia, a lot of Europe. Oh, there's some Brazil. That's interesting. See, so these are very interesting, way to get you started. Let me move the screen a little bit. Another free stat is the from the ITA, International Trade Administration. This one is more statistic based, right? You would put in your HS number. By the way, you may hear a term, this is a good time to talk about this. You may hear a term HS code or HT code or HTS number or Schedule B numbers. They are sometimes used interchangeably. They're two different things, but they both have 10 digits. Every product has every US product has a Schedule B number attached to it. It's just a classification number to a product, to determine the tariff code, or to determine duties and the classification of the product. So the HTS number, the first 6 digits match the Schedule B numbers. But Schedule B is more for US exports, and the last 4 digits is very different. So the okay, I'm confusing everybody. Schedule B number is for US exports. HTS number is for imports into the US. The first 6 digits are the same. The last 4 digits are different, depending on where the country, the destination country is. So here, I am going to choose the first 4 digits of a HTS number. Okay, now it's hopefully it won't freeze on me. I don't know. Let me see. I know. Okay, good. I know lobster is 0306. I'm going to type 0306 here. And I want to look at export. There you go. It's showing me, graphically what countries are the biggest buyer from US lobster. And then if I scroll down the screen here, it shows me a long list of countries that are buying US lobsters. So this is a good way to gauge country potentials. All right. Now let's get back to my last screen here. So this is, finding your foreign market. And is it showing market selection here on my screen or not?
I don't see it. I just see yes, I see the market selection slide. Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, now I have to somehow find the button to advance my screen. Is it showing?
It's still showing the market selection.
Okay, I have to wait. It's being very slow right now. So my mouse doesn't work anymore. Let me just previous page. Advance. Okay, let me try this again. Yeah. Share screen again, this, and move. Okay, does it work?
I see the market selection, yep.
Okay, now, okay, we're advancing, good, perfectly.
Yep.
All right, so here's a long list of, example of how to, what to gauge on when you look at the potential of a foreign market. What is the infrastructure like? What is, is there any trade agreements or barriers with the US? What is the buying power in that market? What is the literacy rate? And, things like that. So I'm not going to bore you, on the details, but this is just an example of helping you, think through some of these considerations when you are determining market potential. Now, products and services. You want to understand what is your bestseller, what is doing well domestically and what is not doing so well, and what might be, doing well in the overseas market. Be mindful that sometimes, products, for instance, your products might be considered or classified as dual use product. Dual use product could be that it's a consumer product, but it could also be used for military purposes. I once heard a story, not a client of mine, but a tennis racket maker used titanium to make their tennis rackets. They got an inquiry from a foreign buyer to buy a substantial amount of their tennis rackets. Did not know about that company. It just, and the country that that inquiry comes from was a little suspicious. So they checked with the Bureau of Industry and Security. it was just a lot of red flags, you know, racing up and down, because, you know, that suddenly there's a lot of titanium records being, you know, being purchased. And if, you know, they suspect that the buyer is using the material to convert into some other products instead of just selling a tennis racket. So, you know, some of these things that might be totally harmless, you know, our products could be, you know, for civilian use, but we just don't know. The best way to find out is to, you know, check with BIS, you know, just to double confirm that your products are safe. I would say a lot of our products, you know, produced in Maine would be, you know, considered civilian products. But, you know, like Mark was saying yesterday in yesterday's section, don't assume, never assume, you know, always good to double check. So then because you are held liable as a producer. Moving on to, you know, your competitiveness in the global market. You know, who is your direct competition? Your competitor might not be that company in Ohio or in Texas. Your competition might be companies from Belgium or from, you know, or from China, and you don't even know they exist, and you don't even know how to find out about them. So, you know, this is a very difficult area to tackle. You know, you can rely on your foreign partners. You can rely on your customers to tell you who your competitors are. Sometimes your competition is not for customer or consumer. Your competitiveness might be on access to local resources, for instance. When I export seafood to, let's say, Indonesia, for instance, they need quotas to import seafood. And if my customer does not have their act together to get their quotas from their government, I cannot export seafood to them. And another challenge could be that I'm competing for cold store, you know, facilities in the overseas market, which I experienced that myself. I could not find any cold storage, you know, in Hong Kong, that I cannot have inventory in that market. That limits my competitiveness. You know, when my customer needs product, I have to ship them in container, you know, load, and sometimes it prohibit them from buying container load products. So those are, you know, different challenges. So don't just think of your competition as just, you know, another maker making the similar products as you do. Marketing and sales. These are some, you know, you domestically, you know who your target customer is. You may know what is central to your brand, and you might know very well what channels to reach your target customers domestically. But when you are looking at going globally, your customer might not be the user of your products. A lot of times your customer is an importer, is a trader or distributor overseas. So, you know, you may find yourself from a business to consumer model to a business to business model. So what is your value proposition? Do you need to change your unique, or what are some of the unique qualifiers, you know, for you to compete, you know, or to engage your customers overseas? It does not have to be major modification for your business, but you might want to know what is the best way for me to work with my immediate customers. Now, I was once told by my own customers that they like working with me, and I was like, why? I am just a small potato here, right? They said they like working with me because I was responsive to them. Simple as that. You know, a lot of times bigger companies, those are the bigger players in the lobster market, they might be too busy to respond to overseas buyers if they have not worked with their buyers before. Whereas I'm just me, and I respond to every inquiry I get, and somehow I managed to get those customers. So, and another consideration too is how would you conduct these marketing activities? Would you be doing it yourself? That might mean that you either hire a full-time staff overseas, or you might be traveling back and forth between Maine and the overseas country if you're doing it yourself. Or would you be, working with a partner overseas to conduct those activities? And if so, who is responsible for what? And where would those expense incur in relations to revenue, coming back? Another consideration, which I really that really got me into international trade, is the cultural aspect of international business. Like we mentioned earlier, every country is different. There's little idiosyncrasies that you might not be aware of, that you might want to prepare yourself before you engage in that market. Some countries, what is the protocol for initial engagement? For instance, some country, when you exchange business card, you use two hands to hand out your cards. You don't use just one hand. You may not be using email as a form of communications. You might be using WhatsApp, or you might be using WeChat. First impression matters as well. Some countries are very formal, when it comes to business attires. So khaki pants might be too casual for them. So, you may want to look at what's the appropriate dress code. In terms of, developing business relationship, what is the proper time frame? You may find yourself working with a potential customers for 3 months now. Nothing is changing. There's no progress. That might not mean that it's a dead deal. It might just mean that they need some more engagement. Might be going to visit them is the way to, to make them feel assured that you are legit, for instance. So there are a lot of things that you can look at, and which I would show you where the resources is to learn about these shortly, because I don't want to change screen back and forth. I don't want to get my screen stuck again. So I would just hold it off until, towards the end of this slide. So another thing, this is a big one. Something that we don't really like to deal with, but we have to deal with. Every country is different. Time and again, we have to say every country is different. They have their own legal and regulatory regulations. For instance, if you sell your products to, you're selling cookies, to a Jewish or Muslim country, do you have any kosher or halal certification on your products? I mentioned the other day, I sold seafood to Thailand, and the seafood processors need to have a third-party audited food safety certification, which can be limiting to, to find suppliers who can supply for Thailand. Selling to Canada, for instance, do we need to modify our labels? The answer is yes. To have dual languages. Selling electronic products, do we need to change the power cord for that country? All those, those are things that you will have to know before you sell your products there. Another thing would be, but ITA, International Trade Administration, they have very detailed foreign regulations by country, which I will show you shortly. That would be a good starting point to help you identify what those regulations are by country. Next is risk mitigation. Again, this is just a list of examples. What is the intellectual property risk? What is the credit risk? Political risk, and for instance, things like that. Know that I'm not trying to scare you here. there will always be something that pop up out of the blue, right? And this is just a list to help you think through some of them. We cannot possibly prevent all mishaps, but identify some of the areas that you might be more vulnerable to would be helpful. And to know what resources are available to help you mitigate these potential risks would be helpful. So again, no need to panic, but just be prepared. These are some of the areas that you might expose yourself to. I do want to talk about the foreign transaction risk. Exim Bank, offers export credit insurance. Exim Bank will be here tomorrow, and they can talk more about that. But they cover up to 95% of your invoice value. That really helped me. I signed up for this insurance last year when I shipped to a new country, and it really gave me the peace of mind that if the buyer does not pay for whatever reason, Exim Bank would come in and the insurance will cover me up to 95%. And so for major transactions, this is really a lifesaver. So I encourage you to come back again if you are interested in this program, and you will learn more about that tomorrow. I promise we're almost done here. Operation and logistic changes. How would exporting impact your domestic operations? The goal really is not to jeopardize your domestic operations, right? But you might find yourself, thinking, do I need to add more employees? Do I need to expand on our facilities? Do we need to extend our hours of operations? And also, what would the overseas operation looks like? Do I need to have a partner of overseas? Do I need to stock inventories overseas? So all this, what we're talking about here is additional costs. So again, if you need financing to fund your international operations, SBA has export loan products that can, cover a lot of the additional expenses, from working capital to the international trade loans or the export express loan. Again, tomorrow's section would dive deeper on those areas. So, Joe Raycraft, our SBA Export Finance Manager, would be talking more, in depth these opportunities to help you fund your international expansion and operations. Lastly, some of these, some of the things that we want to think about is, landed cost, the term landed cost. We don't use that term a lot domestically. If you ship something to someone in California, you just need to talk about, small shipments. It can be postal service, right? It can be US or UPS or FedEx, or you can just truck it to California. But when you ship products overseas, you have a range of additional expenses. You have the ocean freight rate or air freight rate. You will have port charges at, here domestically and overseas. You have customs clearance overseas, and you have duties overseas. And all those, when your buyers in the foreign market, get the products in their port, it could be significantly more than the cost of your products. So pricing terms, when you quote your customers overseas, how do you quote it? There's something called Ecoterms. I can spend all day just talking about Ecoterms, what that means. Essentially, there are 11 Ecoterms. Those terms are rules which define the responsibilities and risk of the buyer and the seller. A lot of times you may hear FOB, you may hear CFR and CIF. Those are Ecoterms, and I'm not going to open that can of worm right now, but just know that you would need to know them when you quote your overseas customers. payment terms. What is the payment terms? Typically, in an ideal scenario, you would want to get cash payment upfront. But your buyer might be hesitant. So, a lot of times the letter of credit would be the most secure way to secure shipments from a buyer perspective and also secure payment from your perspective. And there's documentary collection, short for DP. And then there's, and also open account, which is offering terms to your customers, which happens to be the most common way of collecting. But certainly there would be risk for you as a U.S. exporter, but there are always hedge tools to help you mitigate those risks. Again, Exim Bank, I have to go back to Exim Bank, learn about that tomorrow. Also, what currency to quote your products in. U.S. currency would be good for us as a U.S. company because we don't need to deal with any currency fluctuations, but it might sometimes limit your competitiveness. If you quote in a foreign currency where the destination would is, it might help you get the bid from your customer, but it also exposes you to some financial losses because of currency fluctuation. So you might want to think about that. Also perceived value and demand here. Now, what does it have to do with pricing consideration? In my experience, U.S. products has a perceived high quality value. Let's put it this way. So you may think that my product is selling, $10 here domestically. Some countries, you might make a killer margin overseas because some countries really like U.S. products. They love to import U.S. products. So you might be able to have a bigger buffer on your pricing strategies in some foreign market. So think along that line, understand what your market is and play around, gauge what that buffer is for you. And, if you are able to sell your products at a higher value because of the demand and, the perceived value of your products overseas, you can recover some of the investment costs upfront. So I just want to toss that idea out. Okay, I think this is really almost the end. For financial analysis, the cash flow projection, profit and loss projection and balance sheets are all, relevant. But when it comes to international expansion, you do want to understand that, what is the impact of your international expansion to your overall performances. I do want to stress that, again, initially your export operations might not be profitable. It might create some cash flow constraint for you. So it is important for you to really set some milestone and to track your performance to make sure that your operations, even though it's not profitable immediately, you are heading in the right direction. All right. So free resources, our business advisors, we love freebies. So we always look for free resources for our clients. SBA has a export business planner. It's a great, template for you to, it's 190 some pages to be honest, but it has templates for you to help you walk through all these considerations that we discussed today. So it's free to download, and I believe we can send this presentation material to you after the section, and there's a link here to direct you to this planner. Another one, International Trade Administration website is your best friend. I guarantee you that. It has a long, this is a screenshot of their export solution site. It has everything you need to know about exporting. So if nothing else, this is your first step to do your research. Exim Bank, again, I am a recipient or beneficiary of that export credit insurance, but they have a lot of other solutions to help exporters and importers, to engage in U.S. export. So learn about that tomorrow. And I cannot speak highly of Exim Bank. And they actually have real person talking to you. And when I had questions, I talked to Richard Foy, who will be here tomorrow. So you won't be, emailing someone that, you may not ever hear back, right? So you know where to find Richard if need be. MITC, they are the administrator of the SBA STEP grant. We talked about it in the last 2 days. So just briefly, it's a cost sharing or it's a reimbursement program for your export marketing activities. So again, you can just reach out to MITC to get more information. If your products are U.S. agricultural products, let's put it this way. If your products consist of at least 51% of U.S. agricultural content, you might be eligible for the USDA Market Access Program. Very similar to the STEP program, is also a cost sharing reimbursement program up to 50% of your international expenses. So those are great resources. Lastly, you have 2 minutes to jot this list down. Just kidding. No, this will be sent to you, but these are all resources that help you do your market research and planning. The hyperlinks are all here, all underlined, so feel free to use them. Most of them are free of charge. Some might incur some minimal cost, but it's worth just looking through them. So we are in no shortage of resources. Once you get to a point where you want to talk to your advisor, feel free to reach out to Peter or myself, and we would be more than happy to help. So I'm going to stop sharing for a while now.
Thanks, Grace. That was great. A lot of resources, as Grace shared. And I mean, if you follow the thinking, the U.S. government really would rather export than import, right? So they are going to help you as much as possible to export your products. And as we've been saying through this whole series, a lot of times in our worlds, Grace and I, where we advise small businesses, what we often hear is, I think I'm just too small. I haven't thought of importing or exporting because my size is just so small. I really just have the local market. Well, as we've kind of highlighted here, there's a lot to think about. So not to discourage you, there's more to think about than just your domestic market if you think about exporting. But there's a lot of potential there, potential to smooth out, especially in Maine, some of that cyclical tourism related fields where you're doing really good in Christmas or you're really good in this time of year, but no sales in other parts of the year. Well, if you export, you might be able to flatten that line out and have sales throughout the entire year because sales are good in one country when they're not good in another country. Or maybe the U.S. economy, the red flags for the U.S. economy saying, hey, there might be some trouble here. Well, our dollar, is pretty strong. So maybe in another country, like Grace said, people look for that made in USA or from USA label because they believe in the regulations, the framework of the business that we have, the quality control we have in our country that we've really built up. And they're looking for that when they buy their products. Or quite frankly, sometimes people just want to buy American products because they're American. So there's a lot of different reasons and benefits to getting into the exports. And hopefully these webinars are starting to show you that there's a lot of help out there to help you do it. and that the limit isn't so much your size, it's how, do you want to actually take the time to learn some of the processes, right? And again, resources are there to help you do that. Now we have just a few minutes left, so want to open it up to any questions that there might be out there. Again, chat and or raising a hand is two common ways, and or, I mean, it's a small group today. Again, it will be recorded and you will get the recordings, but while we have a small group, of course, feel free to raise your hand and or unmute yourself and ask the question. And while we're waiting for any questions to pop in, just like Grace said, when you're doing the business plan, the international business plan is adding more to that traditional business plan. And when you're looking at the international focus, there are aspects of the business plan that you should never stop doing, because other country, their rules, their regulations, their prices, their currency, their inflation, or current events in the country, political risk, are always going on. So you as a business owner need to, the whole exercise of that business plan is to get you as a business owner to keep doing those exercises over and over again to make sure your business is positioned in the best place possible, right? As Grace was doing her presentation, I couldn't help but think of some of the big business fails that I've seen in the international market. And one of them was Coors Beer did a international campaign, and their I think their slogan was like "hang loose" or something like that, which was great in America, right? It's like, okay, kick back, don't worry about it. But then when you got to the translation in the foreign country, it was, get diarrhea. And so, of course, you don't want to drink a beer that is going to give you diarrhea. So Coors completely failed, and they're a big company, right? So part of that international business plan is understanding the culture, understanding, hey, maybe talking to a local, say, hey, if you saw this, what would you take from this slogan or this marketing, this advertising? So again, it's just a little work, just a little thought. And the big guys and the small guys both are in the same boat. That's the thing. I guess that's the point of the story. There isn't this magic Wizard of Oz kind of thing where the big companies have this magic key to get into the international market. They're started at ground one, just like you did. And I see that, Fred, you have your hand raised, so feel free to chime in. What's on your mind?
Well, she did an excellent job, first and foremost. But how do you know what duties that each country has and what taxes and stuff like that?
Yep, and there's and Grace can chime in too if you want. There's two ways, right? There's either you yourself can go to, I believe, the International Trade Administration Export Solutions. I think that has a lot of different, you can look up the country and you can look up the product, because the products are classified by codes, and then you can find out what the duty is yourself. But I find that is sometimes prone to errors. So sometimes in that case, it is maybe worth the money to hire someone like they're going to kill me because I can't remember his name right now, but the gentleman that was on yesterday, and that's their job, is to help you classify your product correctly and understand what the costs are going to be, right? So again, there's one method of doing it yourself, and there's resources online. A lot of those resources that we had are there to try to filter down into different countries and different regulations, or because that's sometimes a little burdensome for you because you're new to it, hiring a specialist to just help you with that. And usually it's, you hire them, they get you through to a certain point, and then maybe you can take it over from there. And Grace, what did you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, Fred, you raised a good question here. Now, know that being an exporter, depending on how you quote your overseas buyer, you might not need to worry about what is the import duty in the overseas market. It's the buyer's responsibility to take care of that, unless you quote the products that it will deliver to their door. That would be DAP, I believe. That's the Incoterm. That means you as a seller would cover everything until the products get to the door of the buyer. But in international transaction, if I recall you correctly, Fred, you are exporting apples, for instance. If
Yes.
your buyer in India is the one who would go, who would claim the products at the port in India, he or she would work with their customs broker to pay for the duties and anything that the cost is incurred at that end. So you might not need to concern yourself with that, and your quote to them might just cover all the way until the products get to the destination port. So a lot of times it's considered either CFR, that means cost and freight paid, or CIF, meaning cost, insurance, and freight. So, anything else happen at that end is the responsibilities of the buyer. But it would be good for you to know what they might be, because your buyer may kick back, what, we have to pay this and this and this, so then, I cannot really buy your apples at this price. You have to lower the price for me so that I can pay for those expenses and the destination countries. So at least what they are, so you can do that calculation yourself to make sure that in your price negotiation, if they are telling the truth to you or not. Does it make sense?
Or when you're looking at your market, if you find there's two countries you want to export to rather, and it comes down to just two countries, you can say, okay, well, if they're all the same, let's look at the cost, because that might dictate how much of a price I can get. Like Grace is saying, if one country's like, oh, we're going to charge you an arm and a leg to get apples into this country, then maybe you're going to choose that other country that doesn't charge an arm and a leg to get into first.
Like, I do know what my competitors are. Turkey,
Wait.
Hang on. Hang on.
We have a little trouble hearing you clearly.
Hang on. I'm trying to mute the other one. Do it on your phone first.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so my question is that I do know who my competitors are from other countries.
Yeah.
How do I know what is the market value? And if my buyer is telling me the truth on what they're paying, for example, Turkey or Pakistan.
You mean like what Turkey and Pakistan is paying compared to what you're paying?
No, let's say we're both selling to India. Turkey's selling to India and Pakistan, and they have different seasons.
Yep.
How do I know what they're selling actually to India?
Yeah, these are the intelligence that you would never know. I can tell you, for instance, I sell Maine lobsters, right? I also know that my customers buy Canadian lobsters. I don't know what a Canadian company is selling lobster to my customer. My customer can tell me, if they so choose, but I'm just relying on my customer to tell me what they are getting from Canada. So I guess there's really no way of knowing unless you have boots on the ground overseas that that can be actually in the market, for instance, and to check the pricing, what those apples from Turkey or Pakistan are selling at. So I rely a lot on my customers, not just one customer, but several customers telling me, and I can get a sense of, okay, that's roughly that range Sometimes the customers can lowball, right? Saying that, oh, I can get the same lobster from Canada at this price. You have to drop your price by however much. And I would think, oh, how much of it is just price negotiation? How much of it is true? So, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is, Fred, I don't think there's a formula and there's no sure win way of knowing what your competitors are selling at. Yeah, Peter, do you have other thoughts on that too?
No, I mean, some countries keep tabs on what they export and how much. I don't think they break it down by company. So if you knew your competitor company, I don't think they're going to say, oh, this company exported this many apples, right? And then you could try to figure out maybe what the value was. Instead, they're just going to say, if the country actually keeps track of it, I know the US does, but if the country, let's say Iraq or Pakistan, keeps track of how many apples, they're going to say, well, this is how many tons of apples we exported. And they might break it down to, this is how many tons of apples we exported to India. But I don't know many, if any, countries that would break that down even further into, which company did that. So getting a feel on how much business your competitors are doing or what price they're doing it at. I mean, if you get lucky, you get a country that has that information. But I think ironically, I think they could probably get more information on you because the US keeps track of that quite well and has the public data available, like all those resources that Grace shared. You can look up volumes, but they're in the same boat. They're probably not gonna be able to see your specific information as well. So use that to your advantage as well.
Yep. That's a good point too.
Yeah, because I just wanted to make sure that my apples are at a fair market value, that I'm not undercutting myself or anything like that. And so that if someone's telling me they're paying this much, in all actuality, they're just trying to cutthroat me. Well, I don't want that to happen. And I know Canada sells a lot of lobster.
Yeah. Well, and remember, with any business, whether it's domestic or international, you have to look at your price and you have to understand where that break-even price is and then how much profit you need to make it worthwhile, right? Because there is going to be a final low price that you're going to say, I can't go below this, right? Without making this not worth it.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I got to keep it at a, yes, I do have boots in India. I do have someone over there that can work on my behalf and do everything that I need. He goes to Sri Lanka.
Yep.
He's all over Asia.
And I was going to say the only benefit that larger companies have is they have the money to be able to pay for intelligence in a particular country. Like my brother used to work, was a Marine, and he would joke around that the multi-international companies would send their intelligence guys over and tell you, hey, this is going on over here on this street. And, they would know about it before the US military would. So it was kind of an interesting thing that goes on as you get into more, kind of corporate espionage.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you have someone on the ground, that's worth a lot because they can do some legwork for you and kind of see what's going on. But unless you are willing to go to some drastic measures, I don't think you're going to get the inside documents from your competitors.
Grace, he's also interested in lobsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I have a business
if I can make a
proposition.
buck, I'm here. Hey, Grace, that you've been doing this for 30 years? Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I if there's a way to make money, I'm in it. Avocados, mangoes. I have boots in Mexico. I can import-export from Mexico.
Yeah.
The problem with apples are cheaper in the United States than they are in Mexico.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll be exporting apples to Mexico too.
Yeah.
And the other useful piece of information for you is, what are they selling the apple to the end consumer in the country? Right?
Right.
So in India, in this case, right? What is that end consumer paying for an apple? Because then you can try to kind of work your way backwards into what their profit margin is, right, that they're getting, and then you can kind of understand. Because every business, I mean, let's be honest, every business is looking for a better profit margin. So like Ray said, there's an element to trying to negotiate a lower price just because they want a better margin, not because they have a higher cost. So keep that in mind.
Right. I'm also going to be doing dry blueberries. I'm going to be sending a test of 2020.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was doing a little research on blueberries as well. So I mean, for this presentation, so I can show you where to find information about blueberries.
Well, Maine is the largest in the United States, but Peru is getting big, but they have the high bush versus the low bushes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the high bushes don't have as many antitoxins
Right.
as our low bushes do. And so they're cheaper. And I also know Mexico is starting to produce blueberries in northern Mexico, which is Chihuahua. And I am bilingual.
Nice.
Yeah,
that comes in very handy in an export business.
right. And I lived 10 years in Mexico. So that kind of helps a little.
Yes. Not to cut you off, Fred, that we did have another question from Alberto. Is it okay if we go to that one real quick?
Yes, please.
Yep. So Alberto says, "Hey Grace, for those who think of riches when starting an export business, after how long did it take you to make a profit for your business?"
Well, I started, I incorporated the business 2014, right? And I made very little money in 2015. And things start to, come in more in a meaningful way in 2016. So if you look at it, 2 years for me. And the fortunate thing was that I am still a solopreneur, and I have very low overhead costs. I've been working from my home office. Good thing, because now, see, here's another thing that I did not mention. You don't have to be a producer. Like, I think Fred, you are well aware of that too. A lot of times people think, oh, I have to create my own products, right? And that was my original intent, but you don't have to do that. There's so many people are good at making products. Your role can be the exporter. Like, if you know how to export, if you know a certain market, well, you can actually help these makers or producers export their markets, because their resources are sometimes tied to producing the products, right? They don't have the expertise in exporting. And that is a lot of times the case for lobster processors. There are still big players there, but there are other processors who just care less about exporting. And so, your role can come in as an exporter to help them bring their products overseas. And it's a very, it's a very easy, low cost way to start your export business. And, and the thing is, it doesn't limit you to a certain commodity. You can export different commodity as well. So, it can be a business on its own, just being an exporter.
It's just like any business as well, right? You have a startup phase that is a lot of work, and that's where you incur a lot of expenses to get it up and running. And so you're not going to have, or potentially not have, much profit. But once it's up and running, you get all the structures in place and all the framework is there and all the marketing's done. Then it kind of soaks into the marketing soaks into the viewership, so to say. Then you can start seeing, the uptick. Usually, we know this, Grace and I, because we do with small businesses a lot. It's not year one that people that's really challenging. It's year 3, right? Year 3 is when people decide if it's worth it or not, because year 1, they mentally brace themselves for it to be hard and for there not to be much profit. And then year 2, they're kind of still in that mentality, but they're realizing what the reality is as they're building something. And then by year 3 is when they say, okay, you know, I'm not the millionaire I thought I was going to be right off the bat. I got to decide, do I want to stick with this, or do I want to fold? So from a purely statistical standpoint, year 3 is a 50-50, whether you decide to stay in business or something else happens, you sell it or you get out of business.
And Alberto, another thing too is, for me in my case, you know, what really changed or turned things around for me in 2016 was that I really utilized, you know, the USDA MAP program. I utilized the SBA STEP program, and last year I doubled my sales. And because I utilized SBA loan, I utilized the Export Express loan, and I utilized the Exim Bank insurance, export insurance. So those really, I mean, somehow they became the benchmark for me to, you know, to take the next step as, you know, as I go. So, you know, now early in, you know, what resources are available to you before you even start. So don't undermine these resources, can really help you accelerate. You know, I did not know, I didn't do enough research, and I'm talking about doing market and international business planning. But, you know, now that you know these resources are available, take advantage of them. That will really give you a jump start, quite honestly.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I know that in China it's about 12-hour difference in time zone.
Yeah.
Do you work, Grace, according to their time zone or yours? How do you manage your time?
Well, before I had this job at, you know, the CEI, I worked all day, but, you know, I had the flexibility, certainly. You know, during the day, I work with US companies, I work with you know, my suppliers. In the morning and at night, I work with overseas customers. So my time zone basically around the clock. I managed to have my sleep every night, but now with my full-time job with the Women's Business Center, I work morning and night a lot overseas. So things, you know, kind of change a little bit in my routine, but yes, I do a lot of, sometimes I close the sale, you know, 11 p.m. and I text my supplier and here in the US at 11 p.m. and things happen. And that's the part of the fun though. You know, you work with India, you would know that, you know, the fun is really, you know, if you enjoy working, that's, you know, that's the part. You don't have a set routine, you know, you just make changes as you go. And I thrive, you know, in that kind of environment.
And when I talk to small businesses in that situation, it does depend on how much they need to communicate with the other party. You know, sometimes there's not much communication going on a daily basis. So it's okay if they work, you know, normal hours in the place they are. And then occasionally they might need to jump on a meeting. So they might have to rearrange their schedule. Or if they have more daily interactions, sometimes I see it where they, you know, our regular 8 to 5, maybe they shift it to, you know, working noon to 7, right? And that gets their morning or their end of the day matches up with like the morning where they're doing business, right? So there's just this little overlap where they can get the messages and connect briefly at the same time zone, but they don't necessarily have to become a night owl, you know, to do it. So there's different ways you need to do it. And it is all, of course, depends on the partner that you're working with, right? Because they're in the same boat too. Maybe they are looking to change their hours to meet your demands too. So it's just good communication.
Yeah.
Is basically what it comes down to. We had Alberto asked again, I know seafood prices are based on the market. How do you deal with a product that has a price that fluctuates often more than many other products? The idea of doing business with any product that, oh, I lost it. Let me get it back.
Any product that depends on nature is one of the greatest risks because there's so many variable that you cannot control. It's so true. And I think that happens to Fred too. Fred, isn't that apple prices can fluctuate as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Depending in the season, depending like in the apple season is starting in
Yeah.
the end of July and it goes strong until October.
Yeah.
And then it starts dwindling down in December, January, February, when we have snow in March, and then it starts coming back together. And you
Right.
just need to find someone that has a warehouse and a product that has a longer shelf life.
Right. Same. Yeah. Seafood is the same. About you have a good, observation there. Seafood is also very seasonal. For instance, I sell scallop as well, right? Scallop, basically you can get supply year round. But the really strong seasons is pretty much May and June right now. And actually, I was communicating with my customer last night on scallops. So, so you just have to know the seasonality of these commodities. And another trick is I work with multiple suppliers. So I don't just work with one supplier. So I call around suppliers and get the sense of their pricing, so I can find the best price possible for my customers based on their specifications. Meaning, some of them may want certain size of scallop, and some of them may want, treated or not treated. All these different criterias.